Stay dandy, baby. The League of Villains' epic battle with Re-Destro's meta-liberation army is finally building up to one hell of a climax, and we finally get to learn the mysterious origins of Tomura Shigaraki. And I know this might seem like a bit of a stretch for a guy whose villain costume literally consists of the cut-off hands of his family members, but it's pretty fucked up. But before we begin with my review, I would like to do my quick YouTube call to action, which is to say, if you're liking my content, maybe consider subscribing to the channel for seeing more videos just like this one. If you're already liking it, well, go ahead and destroy the like button. It's super easy to do, and of course, if you want to go that little extra bit, if you really want to support this channel outside of simply watching my videos and commenting on them, please consider checking out my Patreon page. A small donation will help out a lot, not to mention first-time donators. I'll review an anime series of your choosing. I have one that's going to be coming up very soon, so please stay tuned for that. Also, before we begin the review, I would like to ask all of you to go ahead and pre-order your copy of Metroid Dread for the Nintendo Switch, releasing on October 8th, 2021. Nintendo's not paying me for this, I just think Metroid kicks ass, and you should definitely play it. But let's go ahead and dive into this batshit crazy episode of My Hero Academia. Did I say episode? I meant episodes. I'm talking about 2 of them today because, of course, I just can't seem to get a great schedule for reviewing this show. But damn it, I'm gonna talk about it because there's some really cool shit going on in both of these episodes. And we finally are getting ready to go to like the big final battle, or at least what I'm assuming is going to be the final battle of this arc, as Tomura Shigaraki is gonna throw down with Redestro. But before we get to that, we actually pick up from the end of that one episode where Twice was trying to save Himiko Toga, and he was being attacked by one of Redestro's cronies who goes by the name of Skeptic. And Skeptic is kind of like the other side of the coin to Twice in a sense, as he's able to create clones of him to sort of mess with his head. But there's one theme that's going on here in this whole My Villain Academia saga, and it's the fact that the villains themselves are finally starting to get more stronger, and they're awakening some hidden abilities within their quirks. We've already seen this with a few characters like Himiko Toga. We've already seen that fact that Tomura can now basically just decay and destroy multiple people at once, and we're gonna see it with Twice in the episode here that I'm talking about, and it's pretty freaking awesome. One of the coolest things about Twice is that he's had a power to clone himself, but they've gone in a pretty crazy direction with it, with the fact that apparently in the past he thought that he created a clone, which killed his original body, and that's essentially turned him into a fucking nutcase, and that makes him a really fun character to watch here. But we get to see in this episode that he sustains a tremendous amount of damage, and this is important because his clones are actually poofed away Naruto style when they actually receive enough damage, and he ends up getting some limbs broken through all of this, but he realizes that he doesn't disappear, so he might not be as crazy as he actually thought, which allows him to utilize his clones in a way that we've never seen before, essentially creating a massive army of Twices who go around and just kick the shit out of everyone, and it's pretty freaking cool. This is a great moment for his character, and again, it goes in line with the other League of Villain members awakening their hidden powers, and it's also just a really great moment for Twice himself, as frankly, I found his shtick was getting kind of annoying. I mean, it was pretty much the same thing ever since they introduced his character, and it's finally great to see him unlock his true potential in the show, how destructive he really is. Yes, the Meta Liberation Army has a massive force, but Twice himself is a massive force in and of himself, which I think is actually pretty freaking awesome. It's also really great to see that he can utilize his abilities in a number of ways that I didn't even think about, like the fact that he's going to save Himiko Toga by making a clone of her and using her to transfuse her blood into the other body. That's pretty freaking awesome, and it also shows that this guy could essentially be an amazing doctor if he really wanted to. A really fucked up and fractured doctor, but I think that that would actually be pretty freaking awesome. But there are some other parts of this episode which are just as exciting, with the fact that Twice is using his clones, along with Tomura Shigaraki, to go all the way to the top of the tower to meet up with the big bad that is Re-Destro. And we finally get to see his quirk in action, and I had no idea what it was. There was like this one flashback sequence where you saw these weird shadows going on his face. This is actually connected to his quirk proper, where we get to see it in action for the first time. Basically, he pumps up his body Bane style, and they explain it a little bit more in the next one, but essentially he ends up just like wiping the floor with everybody. But this is all essentially a ruse, allowing the real Tomura Shigaraki to actually come over to his tower, touch it once with his fingers, and the whole thing starts to crumble, basically like Ganon's tower in Ocarina of Time, and then we get the big freaking beginning of the battle between the two leaders of these organizations, and it's awesome. And that's what leads us to the next episode of the series, which not only has some really solid action, some explanation behind Re-Destro's powers, but we finally get that backstory on Tomura Shigaraki, and it does not disappoint, and it's delightfully demented. I absolutely love it. But let's talk about Re-Destro for a second. So, like I said, we finally get to see him in action and what his abilities are, and his quirk is apparently stress. That's basically what it is. The stress is really important, though, because apparently he's able to build up this stress, so to speak, and he can weaponize it. It basically allows him to pump himself up, get all big and strong like a freaking Hulk monster, and it basically covers him almost like this weird sort of black armor, and it also just makes him incredibly destructive and pretty freaking badass looking, and he pretty much just brings this stress all down on Tomura Shigaraki as they have a really intense battle, destroying pretty much everything around them. Now, I love this fight, if only for the fact that it looks really cool, but I still love the differing ideologies of these two villains. You have Re-Destro, a character who firmly believes that the world itself can be recreated, it can be rebuilt and turned into something else. And then you have Tomura Shigaraki, who simply just wants to destroy everything. We don't really know a lot of the reasoning behind this. We've gotten some glimpses and we've had some big reveals about his character, like the fact that apparently he is the grandson of Nana Shimura, who's a character who was one of the previous users of the One for All ability, which of course went to All Might and then to Deku. And we know that he was taken in by the big bad of the series, All for One. And he's been groomed to basically be the next generation ultimate villain, and it's so poetic for All for One to use this character to get back at all of those people who've been using that super-powered ability that Deku is now using. But we've never really known too much, like, about his childhood, where he came from, his parents. I mean, just the fact that his grandmother was Nana is a pretty big freaking deal. So let's go ahead and dive into Tomura's backstory, which originally he was known as Tenko Shimura, and of course he had his very own family. His father, who goes by the name of Kotaro, was actually the son of Nana Shimura, and we get to learn that in the past he was living with his family, his sister, his mother, and his two grandparents, and he lived in a very strict household. A household which had one singular rule: don't talk about superheroes, and don't try to become a superhero. We also get to learn that Tenko is very similar to Deku in a sense that he never really had a quirk, or at least initially. It's something that never actually manifested itself, but it's something that he always wanted to do, especially because he lives in a superhero society and everybody loves superheroes. But what's the deal with the rules of this house? Why is Kotaro so freaking hardcore when it comes to not talking about superheroes? I mean, considering that his mother was one of the greatest superheroes of all time. Well, we actually get to learn that at some point in the past when he was a young child, his mother Nana decided to just go off and be superhero full time. Now, the circumstances behind this I don't think are this black and white. She didn't just go off to be a superhero. There were bigger things going on here, and methinks they probably involved All Might and, of course, All for One. Of course, she did this to probably protect her child, but in his eyes, as a young kid, to him it felt like he was probably being abandoned, and this is what caused all of this extreme resentment towards superhero society itself. Thus, when he started a family, he was just not going to accept this at all. And it's heartbreaking to see, as Tenko clearly has a fascination with superpowers, how they work, and being in this society, and his family desperately wants to help, but at the same time, they know how tortured Kotaro is in terms of his relationship that he had with his mother, their grandmother, whom Tenko and his sister never actually met. So throughout the course of this entire scene, we get to see how he's essentially beaten down by his father over the course of a couple of years through the interest of wanting to be a superhero, talking about it, and every single time something bad happens, he basically gets thrown outside and locked away like a bad dog. You know, I'm not saying that My Hero Academia has some of the worst father figures of all, Endeavor, but geez, man, like, Kotaro is definitely one of the worst. I don't want to say he's like the Moby Dick here. He's kind of like the Jaws to Endeavor's Moby Dick, but the fact of the matter is, there's some shitty dads all up in this series. But then we get the big moment of the episode, the origins of Tomura Shigaraki, how he gains his abilities. So, like a lot of characters in the series, we get to learn that sometimes quirks manifest later, and this happens to him, and it ends up having the worst effect possible. And it's all this giant shitty snowball effect where everything just goes to absolute hell. We get to see that Tenko and his sister end up finding this old picture of his father when he was younger with their paternal grandmother, Nana. And of course, they're super excited to learn about this, knowing that their grandmother was some really badass superhero. But when Kotaro figures out about this, Tenko's sister ends up blaming it all on him, and not in like a malicious way, in just the sense that she's a little kid who just doesn't want to get in trouble and decides to blame this on her brother. But this ends up being sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back, as when he's sent outside, he's being consoled by their family dog, and he's petting him and hugging him, trying to just calm himself down after all of this crazy stuff, when suddenly we get to see that his quirk actually manifests for the first time. He starts throwing a ball, and he realizes that when it leaves his hand, it actually starts to disintegrate. When he ends up petting his dog, he ends up completely killing him by disintegrating him and turning him into a giant pile of doggy mush. It's really fucked up, but it manages to get even more fucked up from there when his sister comes out and sees all of the carnage that her younger brother did not intend to do, but she runs away in fear, because if you're gonna see a giant melted dog on the frickin' sidewalk, you're probably gonna flip your shit too. She runs away, he tries to grab onto her, ends up killing her in the process in front of the other family members, his grandparents and his mother, and through some crazy event, he ends up using his power on the ground, which causes a chain reaction, decaying everything in front of him, essentially killing his family. This moment where he tries to grab onto his mother, only for her to crumble away, is nothing short of disturbing. But it gets even worse when his father actually decides to walk out and see all of this. And of course, just the ultimate twist of the knife is the fact that it looks like his father was actually coming around a little bit, realizing that maybe he shouldn't be hiding the past of his true mother and their grandmother to his children, and it looks like he's actually going to apologize. But when he comes out and sees all of this carnage, he immediately just flips the fuck out and starts to attack his son, only for Tenko to just flip out, grab onto his father, and kill him right there on the spot. There's this whole theme going on through the episode where he lives in this house that is ruled by his father, the house that was built by him, and it was only a matter of time before he ended up destroying all of it, leaving him an orphan, into eventually meeting One for All, which I think they're going to get to into the next episode of the series. I saw some previews for that, and I want to learn a little bit more. But essentially, this is a big moment for Tenko, as we get to see that this is the moment where he starts to become Tomura Shigaraki. We cut back to the present storyline of him battling against Re-Destro, where we get to see that his powers are starting to manifest in an even more powerful way, not having to use all 5 fingers to disintegrate things, and the fact that he can now seemingly destroy quirks themselves by simply touching them, which is pretty freaking insane. And not to mention all the training that he's done with Gigantomachia has made him incredibly fast and powerful, to the point where Redestro is pretty freaked out. He's actually using about 80% of his power because, you know, Dragon Ball did it, let's go ahead and do that too. And we get to see that it's basically building up to a massive conflict between both of these characters. And to make matters worse, let's go ahead and just throw another atom bomb into this fucking wacky-ass soup. It's Gigantomachia, who comes through town like God freaking Zilla and is preparing to throw down. Basically, this is where shit is getting awesome. I loved this episode so much. So, what's the rundown on the latest episode of My Hero Academia? I could sing the praises of the most recent episode for days. I really loved the very simple but satisfying backstory of Tomura Shigaraki, and I have a feeling there's going to be a little bit more to it and things that they're going to have to explain in the coming episodes, but for what we're getting right here, I think it's pretty damned exciting. And it's not to say that the previous episode isn't fun either. There are certainly some great moments, and I really do love that just about every single major League of Villains member gets to do something outside of maybe Mr. Compress. I don't know, it's kind of depressing he can't seem to do anything. And maybe Spinner as well, who certainly has some pretty cool moments here. And it looked like they were building up to a moment for him in the most recent episode of the series, but it all got completely interrupted when we went to the Tomura Shigaraki stuff. But still, I'm really digging all of this. They even focus on that one other member of Redestro's group, who is this guy who, as I probably thought like his powers involve actually being able to, basically make people more confident in terms of their physical and mental abilities. Basically, he's like a giant loudspeaker that makes people better. An interesting ability in his overall helmet, which is a weird looking Daft Punk looking thing, and allows him to sort of like communicate with all of the people under him, making them even stronger and basically turning them into an unstoppable force. Spinner seems to have a really tough problem with this, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about him too, because again, he's one of those League of Villain members that just hasn't had like a lot of time devoted to him, and he's a real simple character. He's basically just a lizard dude who looks like freaking Stain, and at his core basically is an evil Ninja Turtle. But bam, I just must learn more about this character. But really, this has all been a lead up to Tomura Shigaraki unveiling his true abilities, his backstory, and how ultimately I think he's going to be able to take down Re-Destro as well as defeating Gigantomachia. And I think that's going to be really awesome. Re-Destro himself in this episode I thought was also really cool. Just I love the overall look of his stress abilities when he goes to like 80%, how it almost looks like this like weird shadow, or dare I call it like a Venom looking suit going over his body and making him look way more demonic and everything. I just think it's so damn awesome, and I can't wait to see how it's all going to end. I'd say it's pretty obvious the League of Villains are almost certainly going to win this battle. They wouldn't take them out at this point in this series. If anything, this arc is sort of like a tent pole for them. It's building them up to put them on a little bit more of a pedestal and to take them to the next level of the villainy that they've been actually wanting to reach this entire time, and I think that's going to be pretty freaking awesome. As I've heard from many of my commenters, again, they've been making some big changes here. I don't know why, because I don't read the manga. I have said that I am going to at least try and read this arc like when I get to the final episode of the season, so I can make kind of a comparison video and give sort of like my unfiltered thoughts on how I felt that they made these changes, because again, to me, they're not bothering me because I can't tell when they're actually happening. If this backstory was accurate to the manga, I'd love to hear about it in the comment section below and to see how it's like, basically impressing people who read the manga. If you like it, if you don't like it, like that's pretty much the whole deal here. But I'm loving both of these episodes a lot. So I think I'm going to give the previous episode a 4 out of 5. I certainly thought there were some really great moments, especially with Twice. He was definitely the star of that episode. But the most recent one, going into Tomura's backstory, I thought was really good. It was very fucked up. It still amazes me that the show can go into some really dark material, despite how bubbly and colorful it is on the outside. It can go into some really big moments. The moment where he killed his dog and his sister, to me, I still think was incredibly disturbing, and even more so when the rest of his family were killed. And it's that tied with the fact that he had like an abusive relationship with his father growing up, and how essentially just nothing went right for this kid. It's just, he's sort of anti-Deku in many senses. He's a character who desperately wanted a quirk, but was told that he should never have one. Deku's a character who didn't have a quirk and really wanted one, and everybody encouraged him, especially his mother. It's definitely an interesting case of what happens when you grow up in a different sort of family environment. It's just really disturbing. And his relationship with his father, especially the moment where he sees that his family was killed and everything, and he sees his son there, and you hear Nana's voice in his head, it's such a heartbreaking moment. It absolutely shredded me to pieces. But this episode right here, I thought it was really good. I think the most recent one I'm talking about, that's a 5 out of 5. I really loved it. But really, as always, I make these videos because I want to hear from you guys. Make sure to sound off in the comment section below telling me what you thought about both of these episodes of My Hero Academia, where you hope this season is going to end, and what you hope for the future of My Hero Academia overall. Let's talk all about it. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay down there, baby.